So here we are, we three queens and a guest who we'll tell you about. I'm Micheline.
I'm a Chieng.
And I'm Musonda.
And a warm welcome to our guest, a friend, and he'll tell you more about himself, James Murua. James, karibu sana.
Asante sana, I'm so excited to be here today. So thank you for inviting me.
Welcome.
My name is James Murua, and I'm a blogger.
Yes.
And I'm also a podcaster. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I like sitting down and telling people what's happening in African writing.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has simplified a lot of the kind of layers and textures of what he does within this idea of being able to tell really brilliant narratives. And I have to say, I love that the sun is shining. I love that the sun is shining. So we're actually going to get started. This show is really about the fact that we have amazing fans as James, and I wanted him to be able to come and sort of share why he even, follows We Three Queens of Africa, but also learn a lot about what he does and what his passions are. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And we are in COVID-19 time, so it's nice to have basically the sun shining. I'm going to put my mask away, being a meter apart from you. What do you think? Are you all going to be masked? What are we
have
doing?
them close by because it's important, guys. It's important for us not to go out of the house without our masks.
Yeah.
But we're outdoors, so
honestly, a meter and a bit apart from everyone, and you can see because my arms are long. I'm just going to pop this away.
I'll hang mine here.
I'm going to keep mine over here.
Yeah, and we'll keep them close. Obviously, use them while we're indoors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting started. First, I just want to ask James a basic question or two. Why do you follow us, and what do you see in We Three Queens of Africa?
It's not as common a thing as you'd imagine. Seeing three black African women, very well educated, polyglots, just shooting the breeze. It's I mean, these are you're knowledgeable. You have every positive thing that I want in somebody to watch, and I the first time I watched it, it was like when everybody tells you check out my stuff. I watched it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is really good, and it actually gets better every single time. I don't know, you're getting better because you seem to be learning the cues or something. So I really enjoy this show. It's something I look for. Like, there's a time you took a break. I was kind of upset. I'm like
COVID-19 break.
COVID-19 break.
Forced upon us.
Yes.
like, where's my fix? I really love your show.
Totally.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about, I'd love to home in on this idea of African narratives, keeping it as broad as that.
So I'll
would you
tell you
say?
a bit about myself.
Yeah,
So because
fantastic.
it'll help you.
Great.
Even
So what happened was when I left high school, I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I wanted to become.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I left high school in the early 90s. And at that time, journalism was a dangerous career. It was a really dangerous profession.
Dangerous.
It was dangerous.
Wow.
I remember when that was the time that Kenya was going through the second liberation movement.
Yes, okay.
Journalists were
course.
disappearing. I went to college instead. I didn't go to journalism school. I went to college.
Okay.
And I went to college. I got the degree. I started having a normal career. Initially, I was in IT.
Right.
I was developing websites. I left the country for a short time, came back, and then eventually I realized I was not really happy with my life because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do.
Right.
So in my early 30s, I decided, okay, let me try this thing, because I really wanted to do it. So
Yeah.
I started again. Remember, I said I was doing websites. So I started a website which I would like post up my ideas, my thoughts
Right.
on what's happening around Nairobi City.
Yeah.
It was called NairobiLiving.com.
Nice.
And you set it up in your name.
No, it was just NairobiLiving.com.
Nairobi Living.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
NairobiLiving.com.
And the people who were reading it were locals?
No, because at that time Kenya's internet was really not good.
I was
Yeah.
thinking this is avant-garde because internet was still, you know,
No, it
very,
wasn't.
very low.
So
kind
it was
of,
only the people outside the country were the main audience.
Okay.
But I think there was a period when I actually said we should do a boycott of Tusker. And it went viral locally because
Oh
people
my
are like,
God.
no, why? Okay, now people are like, yeah, we should do it.
Yeah.
So that's when people noticed me.
By
But
the way, why were you boycotting Tusker?
And the way Kenyans love their Tusker.
so there was a
Please share. I'm not even a beer drinker, but Tusker in Kenya is like golden.
yeah,
This
there was
is
a
the
logic.
brand
There
of
was
the
a
country.
logic behind that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what happened. Tusker Project Fame
Yeah.
showed up and they
Yeah.
said, we want people to come and perform
Yeah.
at Tusker Project Fame, and then they gave the requirements,
Okay.
and the
Which
requirements were that you're between the ages of 21 and 30.
Okay.
And I was like, but we above 30s
Right.
are the biggest people. We're the ones who bought Tusker.
The biggest consumers.
Right.
So
Right.
I was like, no, man, we can't do this. So I did a blog. I
Yeah.
said, guys, these people, if you're over 30, boycott this brand for the period of Tusker Project Fame. So I fast forward a year later, I get a column in a newspaper.
Yeah.
It was a startup called Nairobi Star at the time.
Okay.
And when I started writing for that newspaper, I realized that I didn't know anything about writing. I immediately, within a very short time, I had to learn this thing called writing.
Yeah.
Right.
In 2013, I was actually an editor.
Right.
I was doing it full time. And then I met an artist from Cote d'Ivoire when we were having drinks with friends of mine.
Yeah.
And he asked me, what do you do? And I told him, I'm a newspaper editor, and I'm also a columnist for the same newspaper.
Right.
And then he said, so yes, that's your Ugali writing. So what's your writing?
So Ugali writing, you'll get it
Yeah.
right. So if you just happen not to be East African or Kenyan, we've got to tell, got lots of international audience. Ugali is our local daily maize meal, aka pap, aka posho,
Ugali.
Uganda,
Sima,
Sima,
Sadza.
polenta for the Italians. This is really the food of the land. And so he was doing his basically what?
Ugali.
So
Just
you're like,
your-
this is your Ugali writing.
Yeah.
Where's your writing?
Where's your
Yeah.
And so what do you say to that? And what do you do
I
about that?
actually didn't have anything to say. I was like, I actually sat down and realized that in the last couple of years, I wasn't writing at all.
Well,
I was writing, apart from my column, which was hugely popular, but apart
Yeah,
from my
I
column,
know.
which was in the newspaper, I didn't have anything because I'd stopped doing my narrative.
so you didn't have your James content.
I didn't have any of my own content. It
Okay.
was all newspaper content.
Yeah.
So in 2013, I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a blog.
Yeah.
My partner is a novelist.
Yeah.
I have many novelist friends. And initially, my idea for this blog was I'm going to do content that I can do when I'm still working.
Yeah.
So I specialize in, so I'm going to do African writers.
But what were you doing? So were you just reading up on them and then kind of writing about them, or writing about the angles that they've written about? Like, how did you position it?
So initially, I was just, it was a news service with a few reviews.
I see.
So it was one of those things where like I follow, I follow the writer, and then when the writer says I have a new book, I just take a picture and I say, this writer has a new book, check it out. This is the Amazon link, or this is the publisher.
Right.
That was really the foundation of the site.
Right.
Then
So here's Yvonne's upcoming book.
yeah,
Yvonne
well,
Awards.
actually I love, because I'd say
Oh,
Yvonne's
I
new book
love
is
that book.
coming.
Yeah. Which
Which
one?
one?
Yvonne. So Dust is the book that I absolutely loved. And I just bought the Dragonfly Sea.
So
Can't wait to dig into that next week.
So,
It's
I mean,
amazing.
because, one of the things that I came to learn when I started reading African books by African writers
Yeah.
is because I realized that I wasn't reading. Like,
Ah.
because I used to read a lot as a child. When I left high school, I stopped reading. And then when I started working in the newspaper business, I realized that you need to read to write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is your sorry,
I'm
go,
really
go.
curious.
Uh-huh.
This is such an exciting show, guys.
Get in there, because I know, Msonda, you write as well, and obviously, an avid reader.
Yes, I mean,
Sure,
I'm just, I want to take you back a little bit, because you say that, you take 30 minutes of your day. And I think a number of people in the, out there in the world are very curious about the discipline of writing. Because for me, that I had to be, and I know you're writing, and I know you're doing a lot of exciting. How do you hone that discipline in making sure that you're dedicated and you're sticking to that time?
So one of the things I discovered when I was working for the newspaper was that I used to have like between half an hour and an hour of kind of dead time after I've signed off the page that needs to be, after I've sent off my copy to the designers.
Right.
And then they bring the page so I can sign it off. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us the link to your blog,
Yeah,
actually?
please do.
It's my name, jamesmurua.com.
jamesmurua.com.
Yes,
Check it
James
out.
Murua.
You had a
Check it out.
question that you would.
Yeah,
jumping in with.
I'm amazed at your journey, and I love how candid you've been about it, because you did IT and this and that, and then figured this out, and
Yes.
you were saying earlier that you fell back on the support of your parents while you now followed your heart, and I think that's a really powerful thing to say, because a lot of the time it takes so much courage to do what you did. So a lot of young people, I find, tend to write, whether it's poetry or stories or whatever. And you found a way to kind of take it to the next level, maybe intentionally, maybe by design or by default or by chance, whatever the case was.
Right.
So what would you advise young people? Because I see so many of them who write, some well, some not so well, but they all, you can make a living out of it in some way or form. Like, what could they do with that skill?
So, I mean, one of the things I've learned it was actually by all of them.
Yeah.
By design, by
Yeah.
chance, by luck, all combined, all of them. But the thing that comes with a bit of age is I've come to learn that the thing is, all the skill that you have needs to be improved. So whatever it is that, if you're saying you like poetry, the first thing is you need to be reading poetry. Poets read poetry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because it's ideally you love, if you do it, it's because you love it.
Yes. You're only as good as the stuff you're reading. Number two is like you need to be practicing your art.
Yeah.
And by practicing, you also need to be writing. Like, so no one is asking you to write $3,000 word blogs that nobody's asking you to do that.
Right.
We are asking you to produce whatever it is that you love to produce as often as you can.
Yeah.
So you need to be writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Writing.
Yeah. Building up a little bit on what
So you
Acheng
went to
has
a
said, do
million.
you think courage also matters? To just to be vulnerable enough to let your stuff be seen.
I don't have an issue with the courage or lack of courage. My concern is usually about doing the work, because you'll know when it's ready. Like, that's the thing. Eh?
Okay.
If you're writing,
Yes.
you will know. Okay, this actually I can show. I can share with another person.
Yeah.
We're here because we are so passionate about African. We're so proudly African.
Yes.
We have no apologies to make for being African. And I think our time has come many times over. And we're really, I think, seriously, the world is still one. I mean, it's a good time to be African, honestly.
Amen.
So, because I was going to talk about this because it's actually one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
Is that I always feel like a lot of the international media oftentimes will focus on the negative. A lot about the negative. And I always say, in Africa, as Africans and as Africa, there are so many faces of Africa.
Yes.
We've got the glamorous side as much as we've got the difficult times or the, maybe civil unrest. I mean, but everywhere does.
Exactly.
And yet I think the stories about Africa, and I certainly noticed it when I lived in Europe, were always the negative.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so when I'd show someone pictures
Like,
of,
they don't
these
know
are
that
the
you're
beaches.
sitting here like
Yeah.
this, looking fabulous under the
I
sun.
could be in Paris sitting I need a couple of glasses of something.
Bien
I
sûr,
know,
ma
but I'm
belle.
here in Nairobi, in the middle of Nairobi. Look at all the beautiful trees and the
that's
beautiful
not
people.
on the media.
So
Yeah.
my question, that preamble was so that, what's your point of view on that? But linked to the narratives, but what's your point of view on always
Yes.
the negative and never really the many faces that are that's Africa?
So Number one, We Three Queens is a perfect example of puncturing that narrative.
Pa! Just like, you don't know how excited that makes me feel. Because
No, that's one of the reasons I love you guys. Like, I love
Thank
watching because, guys, if I'm ever seeing a report anywhere, I lived in London, man.
thank you.
If I saw any report that came from Kenya or from, I was terrified. I went to Zimbabwe in 2013. And before I went to Zimbabwe, I was in the newsroom. So I said, okay, let me just watch some things from Zimbabwe.
So you can understand it.
To see, because I've never been.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an idea what it was like.
Yeah.
So I saw, and I was terrified because, you know, I was watching the newswire.
They didn't show you the beautiful clean boulevards
No,
and
it's BBC showing cholera in
gardens
in
of
little
in
areas.
Harare and all of that.
And I was actually a bit terrified. And then I landed in Harare. I was like, but this is Nairobi.
I'm telling
Yeah.
you.
Like Nairobi and Harare are so
They're so
similar.
similar.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, the internet is there. We don't need to be using the BBC, CNN as our frame of reference anymore.
Yeah.
And it's all of them, because even the local media follow. They actually use the same lens as the what do you call
International
this?
media.
As international
Yeah.
media,
Yeah.
because that's where they go to
Unfortunately, yeah,
work.
because that's how they'll sell, isn't it?
Yeah. So what we need to do is try to do
Absolutely.
what the K-pop people did.
Which is?
The K-pop.
Yeah, the boys, the guys who sing.
No, K-pop is
Who are
like a
the
whole
K-pop?
movement. It's a whole movement of Korean pop.
Oh yeah, of course. Absolutely.
The Gangnam Style.
You call it K-pop.
Yeah, it's called K-pop.
Yes.
Yeah.
What they did is that they just sat down and they actually the government invested in their pop music. And what they do is, whenever you're on Twitter, you cannot avoid K-pop.
Exactly. They
Like
just enter your
they will make sure they're
in
there everywhere.
Yeah. So you infiltrate these spaces.
Yeah. So that's what we
Yeah.
need to be doing.
Look, we could sit and talk to James all day about this, but it's really,
So exciting.
I just think those golden
I'm
nuggets
excited,
of
guys.
insights, right, about being able to really spread the African narrative. We need you to ask us whatever you want to ask us, okay? Go for it.
So I'm going to be really boring because
Okay.
no, I'm not going to ask you anything.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, it's boring.
Let's
It's
see,
really
let's
boring.
see.
There's
huh?
no such thing as boring.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is, because I really read a lot of like English writing from English African writers of English Anglophone writing. I mean, could you please share with me some of the writing in the French and Portuguese writing?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be African. It can be Brazilian. Maybe you can give me like 2 or 3 novels that you'd recommend me to read,
Okay.
because I'm trying to open my palette for Africans.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So at least I would say I read about a book a week or 2 when I'm really busy, and I'd say every 4 or 5 books I try to read in French, in Portuguese, or by one of those Francophone and Lusophones. I recently reread Une si longue lettre, So Long a Letter by Mariam Abbas. So whether you can read French or you just read it in English, you may have already read it, right? That's for me a classic. So that's
It's
one.
a beautiful one.
Musonda's looking at me like you have one on the tip of your tongue. And as you come up with it, there's the Angolan author. Oh my goodness, A Transparent City. What's his name?
Anguelusa. Jose Eduardo Anguelusa.
No, although I've read him as well. Creole
Is
is
that
a book by him that I've written.
Is that Miyakoto? No. It's,
Miyakoto, who I've also read.
oh,
A
okay. Oh my
Transparent
God, I'm
City
embarrassed. It's
is coming.
Onjaki.
Yes,
Oh,
Onjaki.
bad.
Is his first name Michael or?
No, he's
I can't
Onjaki. His
remember.
name is Onjaki.
So Onjaki,
Angola.
this book,
Great.
A Transparent City in English. Honestly, the cadence, the richness of the sort of when you're. We have like a Latin language as your first language, and you speak English fluently. That English is going to come out like flowers, like birds, like music, right? And so he writes about this life in this. I won't give it away, but there's this apartment in Luanda, and a lot happens in the apartment. And honestly, his use of language to me is phenomenal, and also knowing that some of it comes out of a place of his speaking Portuguese. I get it. I get where his expressions become so rich. You've got to read. So A Transparent City by
Onjaki.
Let me think. Onjake is how you say it. Now,
I
Anything come to mind?
I loved when I lived in Switzerland. The first non-English speaker I read was from Guadeloupe, Marie
Yes.
Sconde, with Segu. And it's so beautifully written. As somebody who is from the islands, writing about the kingdom of Ségou in Mali, and then I went to do work in Mali, and it just turned out that there was this king called Mansa, and I was born in Mansa, the town called Mansa in Zambia. It's beautiful narrative talking about traditional Africa and Aimé Césaire. I mean, who doesn't love Aimé Césaire?
And I'm also quickly thinking about the God, you're going to kill me because I won't remember the name. So that won't help. Scratch that. But I do want to mention it because you might remember he writes in street Abidjanais slang. And it probably starts with one of those young kind of war soldiers. I'm telling you, the cadence is just like choppy because it's slang. So I'll have to send you his name. And then from Peru, I'm quickly heading to Latin America in my mind. Maria Jose Vargas, who writes many, including the Bad Girl, one of my favorite books. So that's something for like July and August.
You guys are so well read. Okay, so I'm so ashamed to say.
Don't be.
Other than the Aimé Césaire, which I think we did in school, because when I studied French and German, we were obliged to read a lot of authors. But there was a thing about it because it was in school.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I'm gonna admit it. You read to pass your exam. You never read to intern, at least in my time. I hope kids are doing it differently now.
Well, this is
and
why
so,
we're
to be
saying.
honest, I can't even tell you that I remember what those authors, what those books were about.
Right.
And so now, to be honest, I think I should be taking notes
We
with you.
shall
and
send
getting
you
these
all
notes,
that list.
and then just take 3 months off and just read.
It's so
You know?
delightful.
I tend to read a lot of, these kind of, like the Malcolm Gladwell stuff.
That's
Which
fantastic. It's
I love.
completely
Yeah,
useful.
like I love
Tipping
I've got all his
Point,
books and-
Blink. Those are
David
really
and Goliath,
useful.
because I find there's so many interesting nuggets in some of books like that.
Yes.
So I tend to read a lot of those.
And those are fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Brilliant.
we, as
Yeah.
Africans,
So,
also need to be writing those books as well, because there's a huge market for non-fiction. And in this time, I remember the guy who writes in that Abidjanais kind of slang, and the book in French is called Allah n'est pas obligé, which doesn't really translate like God is not really obliged, but it's translated in English, and it would be so interesting to see how he gets that slang translated. Fantastic book. Yeah?
Yes, that was my question, because I want to find books to read, so I'm always looking.
We'll make sure we basically...
And Afropolitan, of course. By Sarr. His last name is S-A-R-R. Very recently published, Senegalese. He's an economist by training, and I should remember his first name.
We'll find it and we'll send it to you. Honestly, the sun is glorious, and it's time for us to call it a wrap, because you've given us so much of your Sunday. So everyone, thank you so much for watching as usual. Please don't forget, we are on Facebook, We Three Queens of Africa /Facebook, and subscribe. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
James.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
Ciao.